This is the Osee GoStream Deck, and it's a video switcher and a recorder and a streaming device. So I'm going to unbox it quickly so that you can see what actually comes in the box. So here's the switcher itself and a quick start guide. The adapter and a few different power types for British one, European one. I think one of these this is the US one, and I think this is the Australian one. So the adapter that comes with it to power it is a lock-on adapter, and it has all the different plug types for different countries. And that's all that comes in the box. In terms of size, it's roughly 25 centimeters in this dimension, 10 centimeters in this dimension, and 5 centimeters in this dimension. It weighs 500 grams. Here's a 12 volt DC input, and the power adapter has a locking mechanism, so you actually screw it on here and it will be stable and reliable, that you won't disconnect by accident like a USB-C type of cable. It has an Ethernet port for live streaming and for use with NDI, and then it has two USB-C ports. So you can use the USB-C port for an additional video input, or you can use it for a video output, and you can also use it for SSD recording of the video footage on the device. Although the device does have an SD card slot in the front, so that might be an easier way to do recordings rather than using an SSD connected to the USB-C port, which means you can use the USB-C port for something else. It has two HDMI output ports, and it has 4 HDMI input ports. And there's a lot of flexibility in terms of the output ports and everything on this device. You can configure everything, so you can have your preview footage and your program footage, or have a combination of all the different inputs that come in to this device, have it output through the HDMI output. So you can actually configure what actually comes out of these. And as I mentioned previously, you also can use one of the USB-C ports as a video output. So you can have 3 ways to output, and that's in addition to the NDI, which would go through the Ethernet port, as well as the live streaming option, which the device does itself, which allows you to live stream to 3 different destinations, although it will be the same video footage going to all 3 destinations. And it has 2 microphone input ports, so 3.5mm TRS microphone input ports, and you can configure these to just have microphone level or microphone level with power, or use them as an audio line-in. So you can configure that inside the application, which is built into this device, so you don't actually need to use a computer to configure anything. You just connect it to a screen, and you can access all the menu items through the keys that are available on the device itself. And it also has a 3.5mm TRS audio output port, and this can be configured to any source. So what I mean by any source is any input source which are coming through to this device, such as the HDMI input ports or the USB input port if you have a webcam or something connected to it. And on the front of the device is the SD card slot, which I mentioned. So it's good that they've used a full-size SD card as opposed to a micro SD card, because that means it generates less heat. And also, I tend to have more SD cards than I have micro SD cards. So the SD card can be used for recording the video footage, or it can be used for playing back a media file and showing that in the output. And it can also be used for firmware updates and import and export of macros, and importing stream keys, or if you change the settings for your live streaming. So if you want to introduce a new service, you can make edits on a file and then insert it here, and then access those destinations or stream keys through the application on this device. And in terms of the speed of the SD card which is required, according to the spec, a V10 SD card is required, so V10 or higher. I think most people have V30 SD cards, so it should be fine. So in terms of branding, there's a few different brandings for SD cards, so V10, C10 or U1. So those are the things that you should pay attention to when buying an SD card for this. But I think most SD cards are either V30, V60 or V90 these days, which means all of them are more than capable to cater for this speed which is required on this. This device has a lot of different features and customization options, and it's a switcher, it's also a recording device, and it's also a live streaming device. So I'm not going to go through all the details of every single functionality, particularly not as a switcher, because it's obvious it has all the features that you need, and there are a lot of videos about the functionality of this device already, so I'm not going to just repeat the same things over. And the device has a manual as well, so if there's anything in particular that you want to find out about, you can look at the manual to see the exact functionality for that particular feature. But overall, this device supports resolutions and frame rates up to 1080p and 60 frames per second. So when it comes to live streaming, I tend to live stream at 1080p and 60 frames per second, or occasionally less frames per second, but my live stream are typically 1080p. So this device works fine in that way. And it does have a menu system, so once you connect the monitor to this, then you can configure and use this device on its own. You don't actually need to connect it to a computer and configure it that way. So through these knobs and buttons, you can actually access all the menu items and view them and change them and so on. Now, in addition to the menu system on this device itself, which you can access through these buttons and view on a screen, there's also a computer application software for it. So if you want it, you could use that, which again will give you the same options but with a different interface. And just to mention a few things about the live streaming, so you can live stream to 3 destinations simultaneously, and the live streams can be up to 10 megabits per second, whereas the video recording can be up to 70 megabits per second. So if you have a fast SD card, so a V10 SD card, which I mentioned before, supports up to 80 megabits per second consistent sequential write. And if you have a V30, is 240 megabits per second. So you can stream it at a lower quality, 3 megabits per second, 6, 10. I mean, it depends on the resolution and frame rate that you're live streaming, but I tend to live stream 1080p at 30 frames per second at 6 megabits per second maximum. And if I'm doing 60 frames per second, then I will aim for around 9 megabits per second. And if you want to change these, you can do it through the application, or if you want to configure it exactly how you want it in terms of the bit rates, then you can do it through the SD card and then access those settings through the device itself, or just use the default settings that are available on the device. It has a green screen functionality, supports macros, and the SD card can be used simultaneously for recording and playback. So if there's a particular video that you have on the SD card and you want to play it back to your output, you can do that. And one of the nice things about this is that the playing of the video won't actually start until you switch to that. So you don't need to time switching to the output and then playing the video, or playing the video and then switching to the output. So just by switching to the output, it will start playing the video which you have selected. So the main advantages of this device, in my opinion, and for my use case, is that first it has SD card recording, and I think that's a really nice feature. So it's not just a video switcher, it's also a recorder, and that can be useful particularly when you're doing live streaming, because you can record a high quality version to the SD card, and the other thing is they're actually using an SD card, which is another bonus, as opposed to recording to an SSD or micro SD card. So it does support SSD, you can do SSD recording, but to me that just takes more space and clogs up one of the USB-C ports, so that's why I prefer SD card recording. Another big advantage of this device is that it has 2 HDMI output ports. So let's just say you're live streaming using the default device settings to 1 destination or 3 destinations, but you want to have a live stream which is using different overlays or different settings or different audio. Then what you can do is take the program output and put that into a different streaming device, and there you can configure a different set of overlays or audio, and you can also do the same thing with the USB-C output to a computer. So technically you can get at least 3 different versions of the stream using this device. The default ones that go out with this, which is 3 streams, and then you have another additional 2 streams which you can configure on an external device how you want it to look in terms of bitrate, overlays, audio, and so on. So that's quite nice for me, because sometimes I want to deliver different types of outputs of the same video to different audiences. For example, let's just say you have a free version of your live stream, and that will get delivered at a lower bit rate with overlays, and then you have a higher quality live stream which gets delivered to paid customers with less advertisement and less overlays and so on. Another big advantage of this device is that it has the built-in menu system, so it doesn't require a computer software. Now there is a computer software for it if you want to use that, but you also have the option to just use a monitor of this and configure everything using the keys on this device itself. And in my opinion, that makes things a lot easier, particularly if you want to consider this device as a more portable device. You can take it with you somewhere and you don't need to worry about having a computer with you because you can connect it to any screen. In terms of disadvantages, so this device lacks separate knobs for each of the inputs. So you have the audio controls here, and there is just one knob to adjust all of these. So if you want to adjust the audio, then you have to go through each of these buttons depending on the input audio that you want from which source, and then you can use this knob to adjust it. Whereas if there's a knob for each input, then it's easier to remember exactly what the audio level for each of the different inputs are. That just makes it a little bit easier to use. But within the size of this device, I don't really see how they could have added more buttons for individual inputs. And if you compare this to competing products, some of them don't have the preview buttons here. So what they've done is they have unique buttons and knobs for each of the audio levels, but they've gotten rid of one set of these buttons here. And in order to use preview and program, then you have to have a third button to press and then iterate through that. So essentially it's whether you iterate your audio buttons or whether you iterate the program and actual video output. And that's the only way that it can be kept in this size, I guess. Previously, I did a review of the GoStream M2 dual HDMI switcher, but one of the things about this one is that it's just a switcher, so you can't live stream directly using this device. You need to connect it to another device and then live stream that way. Whereas with this device, you can live stream and you can record the video, and it's a switcher and it supports more inputs and outputs and so on. So in that sense, this is obviously substantially better, but it is larger as well and it requires more power to run it. So if you want to use this in a remote place, then you obviously need to take the power supply with you or have a power source with you. So you require a little bit more planning and equipment with you, or just make sure that you have access to power if you want to use this somewhere. Whereas with the GoStream M2, you could probably just connect it to your camera rig or your tripod and have it connected to two different cameras. Now, another potential disadvantage is that when you live stream with this device using its built-in live streaming feature, even if you send the stream to 3 different destinations, all of them will have the same encoded video. So you can't have 3 different videos going to different destinations. You have the same video going to all 3 different destinations. And the workaround for that is to use one of the output ports, either the HDMI or the USB-C output, and then encode it with another device and then change the settings that way. So here I've connected the output of this camera to the HDMI 1 input port, and the output from this has been connected to a screen. So I don't know how clearly you can see in this screen, but essentially what you have is the preview window, the program window, and all the different inputs, which are currently blank because I haven't used them. And here on this window, which is very small, is the menu system. So I'm recording the output here on this external device so that I can enlarge this in the final video output. But essentially what you can do here is scroll to the different options. So I select English and then I press down on this knob. So basically you can use this dial to scroll through the menu and you press it down to select a particular option. This is the menu button which you press to go through the different options in the menu. Another thing worth mentioning about this device is that it has an active fan, so it's blowing air out from both sides, which helps keep it cool, but it also does produce a little bit of noise. So you just want to make sure that you don't put this device right next to a microphone where the noise will be captured. So you can use this dial to scroll through the different options on the menu and then select what you want. And there's a lot of customization, so I'm not going to go through the menu system, but there's a manual which you can look up for anything that you want. So if I go to the streaming option, here you can see stream 1 and stream 2 and stream 3, and there's also an option to load settings. So loading settings is what you wanted to do if you have a new live streaming destination. And one thing worth mentioning is that if you want to transfer information from this device to your SD card or vice versa, then you should use the menu system to go to the SD card, format it, and then transfer the files there, and you can import and export the profile. So anything that you want to change and transfer to this device via the SD card, you can do it and then load it from the menu system. And all of these functionality is available through the computer software as well. So if you wanted to do things through the computer software, you could do that. But this has the flexibility that you don't need a computer. A screen is enough just so that you can see what you're actually doing. And all of these screens, pretty much everything on this device is configurable and customizable. So you can customize a lot of things on this device. And again, I would refer you to the manual to see exactly how to customize different buttons and how to use macros and so on. Anyway, let me know if you have any questions about this device or if you want me to test it in any particular way.